introduce Mike Jackson, who was in several of my classes, but the one class that he took with me a couple of semesters ago dealt with 20th century European literature. So today he's going to talk about Anthony Burgess's novel A Clockwork Orange that you may be familiar with because you may have watched Stanley Kubrick's movie, and he's going to talk about how this book is kind of marginal in terms of being modern and postmodern at the same time, kind of being at that on that threshold. So I'm going to give the floor to Mike.
Good afternoon. With a show of hands, how many of you have heard the phrase, there's always two sides to a story? Show of hands. Good, thank you. Again, with show of hands, how many of you have faith in the overall goodness of mankind? Show of hands. All right, kind of lacking on that one. That's fine. The reason I ask, these two questions that I just proposed to you are coinciding with my research paper that I did in Kostova's class on A Clockwork Orange. And it's entitled The Flight from Modernism to Postmodernism, based on Anthony Burgess's novel. Between the 1910s and between 1960s, some say 70s, it's kind of a gray area on when modernism actually ended. But modernism was a time when writers actually saw the goodness in mankind, and they reflected that in their work. Often it was presented in satire, and they often used a character who was also the narrator. And with the central character, he used stream of consciousness. So that way, we as the reader, we can understand what the thought process of that character, and based on the environment, what's going on. And during this early time era that the story was written, Burgess saw a lot of downfall in humanity. Like I said, with modernism, again, with the 1910 through the 60s, and during that time you had both world wars, specifically the Second World War, which really had a deep impact on people, writers, and audience. Burgess wrote and insisted, sorry, I'm new to technology, but Burgess insisted that his book be interpreted as a modernist work. And he did this by providing, in his publication, 21 chapters. And in that 21st chapter, that is the toll that actually shows whether the novel is modernism or postmodernism. With the British, the original publication, it is Alex, the central character, who's also like a rapist, killer, criminal. He changes, excuse me, he has a change of heart and does a complete 180, and he sees himself as a family man. He wants to become a father, and all this he sees and begins to reflect by seeing a simple billboard. And Burgess sees that mankind actually has that impulse to be good. Whereas with the American publication, and also with the 1971 Kubrick film, Clockwork Orange, that 21st chapter is omitted. So we as Americans, well, back in 71, we did not get wind of the 21st chapter. And that's because of the time that it was written. Like I said, it was that gray area, the 60s and 70s, where you still have lingering modernist views, and you also have postmodernist views that are coming in. And so the Americans were more open to the postmodern, in my opinion. And postmodern is where there's no moral system. And it's all about industry, it's all about unity, there's no self. No one can think for themselves, it's all done for you, whether it's government or some higher power. And that's why Kubrick in the American publication omitted that 21st chapter. Because in that 21st chapter being omitted, we're left with Alex returning back to his old ways of crime, violence, rape, murder, and to invite But in my opinion, I think the novel is more postmodern when you leave out the 21st chapter. And I'm going to invite the author himself, Anthony Burgess, to speak on the subject matter. Bear with me for 1 second.
Science fiction somehow chimed with the mood of the time, and even otherwise conventional novelists like Anthony Burgess found themselves embracing it as a means of exploring their concerns about the world. In 1962, Burgess published what would become his most famous work, A Clockwork Orange. Later immortalized by Stanley Kubrick's controversial film, A Clockwork Orange offers a terrifyingly bleak view of youth and violence in a society of the near future. The novel follows the character of Alex, a Beethoven-loving young thug who leads his gang on nightly orgies of violence and mayhem. But when Alex is arrested, he is subjected to a brutal program of reconditioning. Burgess even created his own futuristic slang.
What's it going to be then, eh? There was me, that is Alex, and my 3 Drews, that is Pete, Georgie and Jim. Jim being really Jim. And we're sat in the Corolla Milk Bar and making up our roster looks. What to do with you? Our pockets were full of debt, so there was no real need from the point of view of crafting any more pretty folly to torch off some old deck in an alley and bid him swim in his blood while we counted the takings and divided by 4.
Partly inspired by the juvenile delinquency of the 50s and 60s, Burgess also seemed
In the 1960s, the possibility of getting these young thugs and not putting them in jail because jails lead for professional criminals, but rather putting them through a course of conditioning, turning them in effect into clockwork oranges. No longer organisms or sweetness and colour of life like oranges, but machines. I feared this, and that's why I wrote the novel. I feared the possibility that the state was all too ready to start taking over our brains and turning us into good as it is without politics.
Anthony Burgess made science fiction about the here and now. It was territory that another novelist, J.G. Ballard.
So to reiterate, with the 21st chapter of A Clockwork Orange, we have a a modernist view. Burgess wants to ensure that people have goodness in mankind, that it's innate, that no matter what we do in our youth, that we always have a chance to change in our adulthood, that we always have that opportunity to better ourselves, to want better. But unlike the American publication and the American film, they're stuck on the postmodernist view, which, like I said, is omitted from the 21st chapter.